Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, What Partners Really Want, Why One-Third of Partner Programs Are Dead on Arrival. I'm Terry Moffat, editor at Channel Marketer Report, and I'll be your moderator for this presentation. During today's presentation, please follow along and share your thoughts and feedback on Twitter and LinkedIn using the hashtag Channel Partner Growth. All of our Twitter handles are right here on the screen, and we look forward to connecting with you on social. If you haven't done so already, please join partner professionals reading our CMR newsletter by subscribing to channelmarketerreport.com today. And another important resource is our sister publication, Demand Gen Report. You can subscribe for its weekly newsletter at demandgenreport.com. Another thing that I'd like to tell you about is our next virtual event, which is the B2B Marketing Exchange Next Level ABM, which will take place June 7th and 9th, 2021. Just announced last month, Next Level ABM is about digging into areas that are critical to successful ABM campaigns, specifically around audience targeting and segmentation. The channel-focused track, Precision Partnering, will offer insight on how to optimize through channel marketing programs by more carefully aligning initiatives with the most appropriate partners. More information is available in our resources, so check it out. For today's presentation, we're using the On24 platform. During the presentation, you can access all the information you need from the platform toolbar. We encourage you to ask our presenters question. To do so, simply click the Q&A widget at the top right corner of the screen. Today's presentation is slated to run about 45 minutes with 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A following the sessions. You can submit your questions using the Q&A widget at any time. Today's session is being recorded, and all attendees will receive an archive link to the presentation to go back and review or share with their colleagues. We also encourage you to let us know how we're doing so we can continue to improve the level of value we provide to you. Please take our survey that will automatically launch once this webinar session ends. You can also pull it up now, complete and submit the survey at any time during the webinar by clicking on the survey icon cycled here on the bottom of your screen. Before signing off today, please take a moment to complete the questionnaire. So thanks for that. All right, so let's get on with the presentation today. I'm really excited to introduce our speakers today. Jay McBain, a principal analyst at Forrester, is one of the most visible and respected thought leaders in the global channel. Named to the top 40 under 40 by the Business Review, as well as numerous channel magazines to their top influencer lists. He is often sought out for industry guidance and future trends. He has spent his 27-year career in various executive channel roles, including marketing and strategy roles within IBM, Lenovo, and Channelize. Ellen Lincolnholker is the Insights and Strategy Leader for ITA Group's Channel Partner Solutioning and Incentives Practice. She has worked in technology, software, and service companies, both as part of a channel and as a leader. She is an award-winning marketer and navigates all things channel, marketing, incentives, and engagements in her role with ITA Group, including pioneering thought leadership on channel partner ecosystems and the partner experience. So we're really in good hands today. So without further ado, I'm going to pass this over to Ellen and Jay to kick off the presentation.
Thank you, Terry, for the lovely introductions. I'm excited to dig into the good stuff, and I'm really excited to have Jay with us as well. We're going to move quick, so don't worry if there's something you want to go back and hear again. You're going to get a copy of the deck. So we're gonna go fast and furious. So first off, how are we going to help programs not be dead on arrival? Why did we do this research? Why now? We actually set out to understand what that new era of channel program should look like, kind of based on what partners find most valuable, needed, what would increase their investments of time, resources, and revenue with the vendor. And during that process, we uncovered some things about what the future holds. And this webinar is going to dive into those findings and identify areas of change that can help us all build a better channel program that's designed for the future. And to kick us off, I'm going to send it over to Jay.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And we'll always begin with the end in mind here in terms of what the key findings were from the research. First and foremost, it's, why do partners participate in the first place? To improve their products, services, and people, what their greatest challenges are in terms of participating in a multitude of programs and what that means. And then partners obviously are looking to increase time and revenue investments and how they personalize their benefit incentives. So we're going to be digging into that today. We're going to be looking at motivation. We're going to look at some behaviors. We're going to look at some psychology, but really where, the effort and, differentiation in terms of vendor programs and really the differences in the last year. And that's probably the biggest storyline that we found out in this research is that, over the course of years and decades, some of the results of these types of surveys get pretty predictable. But what we found is the pandemic has maybe forever changed, programs and partners and what they're looking for. And if you just look here in terms of what the pre-pandemic results were, both from an owner and a rep perspective, we wanted to make sure we got both perspectives and then look at it, a year ago and then look at it today. And you can see that the stack rank list looks very, very different. Things are moving in terms of stack ranking and priority. You can see, things like lead and opportunity management jumping right to the top of the list, both for owners and for reps. And we're going to dig in today what that means. And, really on the owner side, how they've changed their perception of working with vendors and distributors, how they look at programs, but they're looking at their own businesses. For many cases, this has now changed the trajectory of their business. And they're looking at the next 3, 5, 10 years and business building and building out practices and what kind of skills they need. But where are the opportunities going forward? What is the relevance around customer needs, this whole customer experience, and the communication required to drive that? And now it's sales reps, we always think that they think, as coin-operated type of sales reps thinking through their sales plan. Well, they're focused on revenue opportunities, obviously. But, from their perspective, sales and marketing, training, enablement, onboarding, certifications, all those things are starting to percolate up the list. Understanding that the skills that drove the last, number of years in their business and allowed them to reach quota may not be the skills they require going forward. And they're looking at vendor programs to drive that. So really interesting as we, look at these results and, where we take the business going forward.
Absolutely. And so we're going to dive into a couple of the things Jay mentioned with some practical tips on what can you do right now to help with some of these things that are percolating to the top of that stack rank list. And the first one's really that revenue opportunity application that Jay was talking about. So here are some questions for you to tackle with your team. The ones that I really want to point out is the question about how are you going to create those leads? Are you doing it together? Are you doing it on your own? Are they doing it on their own? And then the question I always like to throw out here is, are you truly wanting lead gen or are you wanting demand gen? And the difference is really, are you creating opportunities or are you collecting names? And this is a pretty common failing point that I see in lead generation efforts, where a conversion of any sort usually means you've collected a name that's now a lead and it gets passed off. But is there actually an opportunity there? Have you generated demand, or do you just know someone's name now? And then once you get a lead, what are you doing with it? Here's some more questions for you to tackle with your team. Are you going to log opportunities? Is it different if they make it or you make it or you send it to them? And then the one thing that I would hear from the marketing side of it is what you do after creating a lead or a demand generation or an opportunity is more important than actually obtaining that name. And this is where your ROI will make or break itself. So if this is a blank spot for you and you're just handing things over, take a second look here for some things that you can actually do to impact whether that is successful for them or not. And then on the topic of how do you actually do this, here's a couple of ideas for you to take back with you. I know everyone was into virtual events, but what was different about this one on the left was we actually had done 2 different enablement sets of packages, one for those field managers to roll out with partners and one for partners to roll out with other prospects. And then there was an engagement mailing kit, which actually wasn't sent out before the event. It was sent out after, which is different. And it also just extended the length of that engagement. They had to sign up for it. It was also kind of a fun little influencer tactic because they were posting about it. It just really extended the reach of that lead generation and demand generation effort. And it was also paid for by MDF and ran in conjunction with an incentive. Another quick thing you can do to help with that revenue generating opportunity is to put that enablement in their hands along the way. So if you send something to them, are you including training enablement with it? Are you putting sell sheets or objection handling in there? Or are you just kind of handing it off and saying, okay, best of luck. Hope that works out for you. And then the last example is kind of again, tapping into those field managers with some enablement kits or those local partners who are key to you to really expand what's going on at that brand level. So it can double as excitement, enablement. You can send them things to do with the local materials. You can or tell them what to do with a leader interested party. And I know it's a little more expensive to mail something like this, but when you're running promotions, it might make sense here and there to do something that's not digital that kind of breaks through the clutter and noise. One of the other things I promised Fast and Furious that Jay mentioned was training and enablement. And this is a huge opportunity if you haven't looked at it or updated it in a while. Here's a couple of ways to weave that into everything that you're doing, starting with your earning structure. You can infuse it into your onboarding. Make sure that you're sending something different and relevant during the first 6 months than maybe a tenured partner who maybe you need to just get re-upped on some new product lines. And then also weave it into promotions, kind of like the leads. Ship something off when you're rolling it out. How can you help them sell what you're asking them to do? Another really quick one is just infuse it in your training, make it on their portals when they log in, give them badging for people who are more intrinsically motivated, who don't maybe want to be, they want to take it to learn. And then you can even incorporate it ongoing. And we've seen it work really, really well to increase sales if you're incorporating training, like 250% more likely to sell something if they are taking those programming courses. With that, back over to Jay for some more data.
All right. Yeah. So looking at the survey results, this is really the last 12 months. And when we talked about product and solution development, thinking about the business more holistically as a partner, you can see the sorting of some of the more near-term incentives or market development funds or demand gen marketing. Some of the rebate structures and things. This didn't drop to the bottom in terms of importance, but it just dropped down the list a little bit from what we normally see. And you start to see again at the top, this whole idea of, building out new practices and obviously getting the skills, the training in the enablement to be successful. And again, when we split it both ways, owner and reps are looking at that same idea. And they're both aligned in terms of where they're driving the business and getting that enablement and getting that support necessary to make that work. So it was really interesting. And you can see the numbers here, especially on the partner side, how high the product and solution development part of it was as compared to others. So again, this was a little bit shocking for us because we've asked this question over the course of years. And if you're talking about dead on arrival, and if you're talking about the 2021 program and what partners really want, interesting to see these results. And so this business transformation idea around product and solutions, it's overtaking this whole idea of, I want more leads, I want more leads, I want, the latest incentive. In a pandemic, and especially in a time like this, companies are rethinking how they go to market, their customers, how they serve their customers. And I think that was one of the things that jumped out at us the most.
It really was. So not only are they joining programs for vendors to help them, do better at their products and their marketing and their learning and helping them go to market. These are the things that are going to be important for you to infuse in those recruitment and onboarding messages. Are you putting that message that they joined the program for in front of them to make sure that they find that valuable? So it's not just about the sales spiffs and products. You need to serve those up eventually, but make sure they're getting the best of both worlds and what they joined for. And make sure that that message is different for that partner versus that rep, because they have different things that they want from you and the reasons that they joined. And I would always encourage you to do some research, focus groups, or surveys. Do something besides rely on your gut when you're developing some of these messages that are going to garner participation from your partners. And then my second tip here is kind of relying on, that new buyer's journey. So Jay had mentioned things are changing, things are evolving, things are transforming. And so my second tip here is to really correlate that partner journey to the enablement and buyer journey. And there's a couple of reasons to do this, and I'll explain what I mean. But you want to do this because you'll have a better sense of what you need to make and supply to partners for enablement. You'll almost create a guide for what to share and when. It can improve the partner experience, and it's also a good foundation for mapping training elements too. So it's much less likely you're going to feel like enablement is a black hole where you spend all this time making all these resources and videos and trainings and then feel like they may or may not get used. And so here's the example I was going to share with you. Like if you take a look at this line, this partner journey, this onboarding, this recruitment, this enablement, help them make a sale, they implement, support, grow, retain, all of these elements. And then you've got this giant bucket of enablement right here. And it's actually really, really big. It doesn't look very big on this, but it's huge. And the way that you can make this better is by overlaying that buyer's journey to it. And this is what we mean when we're saying that people are purchasing differently. So if you can take your enablement and start to map this along that buyer's journey, you're going to help partners find what they need and help customers have a better end experience as well. One last thing on this is I would recommend that if you have more than one customer segment, you should have a map that looks like this for each one of those to help your partners better go to market with you to your customers together.
Yeah, so it's interesting when we take another look at the data. I drew a line between the second one and the first one, both on the owner side and the rep side. But the fact that, we're in 2021 and people are complaining that it's difficult to participate, qualify, or advance, that vendors are unnecessarily making things complex, in today's world. Again, looking at product and solution, looking at, driving more opportunities, looking at reframing their business, and they find there's just difficulty in participating. There's difficulty in moving ahead. This is, perhaps one of the kind of errors that companies are making, that they should be focusing on the partner experience as much as they are focusing on the customer experience. And looking at other, things that we see here, where there's not great sharing or communication around opportunities, limited enablement. These are all the things. If you go back to what they really want and then what they're having difficulty with, there's a direct correlation here. And so we're finding that those programs that are successful and the feedback that we got are really anchored on this ease of use, this rethinking that partner experience and automation, self-service, flexibility, adaptability, and allowing partners, both at the owner and rep level, to go and get what they need without artificial gates and without artificial processes or workflows that slow them down. And, being able to manage, multiple vendors and be able to choose those vendors based on that partner experience, we're starting to learn is more important now than, somebody that has 5 or 10 cents more of incentive per dollar. And this is becoming the new battleground.
I totally agree, Jay. This, to me, is one of those areas that feels like the thing that's going to make your program dead on arrival. So if you are hard to do business with and it's not easy to understand where I'm at, what I'm doing, and what is going to help us both win, it's going to become a differentiator, like Jay mentioned. So here's a couple of practical tips to help you make that partner experience a little better. And one of the first ones that I was going to point out was a dashboard. And it's pretty common for program administrators or even field managers to have access to something like this without reporting or sales details. But the disconnect commonly comes in the tracking of eligibility, enrollment, engagement, progress, next actions. So not doing some of these things can make your program dead on arrival. So a few great ways to tackle that is to take a dashboard like this and make it available down to the people who can actually change the metric on the screen, which is those reps or those participants or those people in the partner program. So give them something that's broken down for them. And we've seen this repeatedly. When you break it down for what's relevant to them, make it easier for them to achieve. They know what to do and they know what to go next. Another great thing to do around goal tracking and eligibility is actually to embed that into the partner experience portal. So put relevant things in there for them. How are they doing? Where are they at? What's the next threshold they need to cross? And then depending on how much data you have access to, you can even use advanced techniques like machine learning and AI, like we're doing in this case, to recommend next best actions based on a combination of historical performance of similar participants who are in a different partner, and then also the role, and then recommending what would make the sense for them to serve and sell next. So these are just a few ways that you can start to dig into making things easy. Back over to you.
Okay. And so, yeah, it was interesting because we asked the question directly, what does deter you? And both from an owner and partner perspective, it was interesting, again, see both of them almost in the same order, say that there's just too many promotions. And I was guilty of this when I was on the vendor side of, announcing a new program or resurfacing the program for a new year, but not getting rid of any old programs. It was just building on top of. And then at some point you get 10 and 20 and 30 and 40 different competing promotions. And, the partners and owners just throw up their hands because it's too hard to understand. It's confusing. And all of these promotions going on at once, you have to hire somebody full time just to figure out what's going on. And this is getting worse, not better. And, coming out of a pandemic, like we've already said, they're looking to build their business. They're looking not at the latest, Starbucks card or the latest, incentives and try to put it all together. And I always say that, if you require your partners to have a decoder ring to figure out what you do, because keep in mind, regardless of their industry, they're probably working with 8 to 10 vendors every day and maybe up to another 10 to 20, on a monthly basis. So if you're, making them come in and figure out exactly how they make money and adding all these things together and reading the terms and conditions and all the small print, this amount of overzealous with programs, you're going to be dead on arrival because they're looking at clean line of sight. They want obviously open communication and transparency. But again, they're building their business, they're going through a transformation, and they want to link that to return on invested capital to make sure that they're successful at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And one of the ways that you can tackle that right now is just to simplify your program. And I do know that it is a fine balance to strike between being absent and being easy to work with. And consolidating various programs, perhaps driven by separated products, business units, into a flat earning program with additional spiffs or more savvy eligibility requirements or whatever you're doing on top of that, but to make it less for them, also we've seen tends to make it less of an administrative burden too, for your channel team. So a good example of this is just uniting all of your brands or products or services under one kind of umbrella program that everybody can join. And then within that, you can start to separate it out and run things that are relevant for the right person or the right partner. And then it gives that flexibility. So if people do want to change or grow like they're doing right now, maybe they're adding new lines of business, maybe they're learning a different competency, it gives them the flexibility to more easily relate to you, your brand, sell those different things that you're trying to help do together. And then, once they're doing all that, it can make data collection a little easier too, because you're consolidating things into one place. So as you're breaking down these silos, there's a lot of benefit for everybody involved when you can do this. And we've also seen that if you're doing consolidation programs like this, especially if it was really cumbersome before, that participation goes up pretty wildly, like even up over 60% of your partners participating in selling. It's pretty incredible. And the other thing that I would throw out there as a practical tip for some of this is just be clear in your communications. I think segmentation and personalization here is really key. And what I mean by that is not just putting a name or a company into the header. Offer things that are relevant to them and who they serve. So if you're sending things based on revenue, you might just be adding more noise. An example of that is like if you are a partner who supports medium-sized customers and maybe you're specializing in manufacturing clients and that's who you sell to, but the vendor you're working with will keep sending you all of these newest large deal cloud things that are just not going to be relevant for your buyer. And so you just hit delete. You continually just delete everything because it's just more noise for you. So the more that you can segment based on engagement and what they're likely to help with or what's relevant for them or their customers, the better you're going to break through that noise and be relevant. And the last note I would say is just be proactive. A lot of the times you see things kind of launched, announced, and left. But if people are in your program and they're really close to that next threshold, or you want them to do something else, like be proactive. Don't just make it about the promotions. Always be sending things that say, hey, 2 more deals and you'll be on this bracket, or you're going to earn this benefit, or you'll get something else. So just make sure that if your channel budget is really, really low in the communications area, that might be something to look at in the future for 2021 based on all the findings. Back over to you, Jay.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if I were to set up a set of KPIs, given what we've learned and given some of the changes that have happened, these are some of the new KPIs I would be figuring out and, having that dashboard that you showed, basically measuring how we're doing against these requirements. So better communication and collaboration, not just better against the competition, but, better from a partner perspective that really drives their business. The tying in the incentives and reward opportunities, but then again, tailoring them, personalizing them to the business, to the customers, and to the actual person. Whether it is a sales rep on the floor, inside sales rep, outside sales rep, the owner principal, getting that double click in. And then what we learned earlier is from an ownership perspective, really making sure the enablement is there and that you've got that underpinning of business building, which is demand generation. And on the sales rep side, making sure the training, the onboarding, the skills, the certifications, all those things are up to par, and that you're helping them along in these new business opportunities. The co-marketing and co-selling is critical. So, there's a new set of KPIs that a modern program, should have. And, some of the older KPIs would go into the DOA category of just doing the revenue, profit, customer sat measurements of the past. And so we're looking at this movement from pure transactional type of relationships, coin operated, see a bear, shoot a bear type of sales approaches into more ecosystem style, where it's about value creation. It's about co-innovation. It's about building out network effects. It's this 1 + 1 = 3. And looking at partners that can drive influence and can drive retention and can drive value add for the customer and drive adoption and drive, different things like stickiness and get those renewals and upsell and cross-sell. So there's so much more in this environment now. And these are where partners are changing their business models around and how they're seeing profit and how they're, seeing their business model change as well. So it's absolutely critical in terms of understanding the KPIs, but aligning that to where you're getting the value out of your partners. And it may not just be at the transactional level.
Absolutely. And one of the best things that you can do when you're broadening beyond just that transactional component is be very clear in what you're talking about. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but what you say and how you say it and where you say it is going to be important. So here are some more questions that you can ask your team or your agency or whoever you're working with to do that partner marketing. But it can't just be emails and newsletters. Like, you need to reach them where they're at. You need to know who you're talking to. You need to make it relevant for them. You need to be talking about how things are changing too. Some examples to spur some creative juices for you about going beyond just kind of an email or a newsletter or something is to be creative. Don't be afraid to go beyond something just to stand out. Do video, text messages that make sense for your partner audience. Do a physical kit, drive excitement, reach them in the community that they're participating in. The very best way for you to break through to these other areas that aren't transactional is to break through the noise and surprise people. Be clear in what you're saying, be unexpected and look different. And I would never underestimate the value of fun theming either, which sounds lame, but it's so important. And we see giant upticks in participation when promotions are rolled out, whether they're for transactional, influence, or retention strategies. You can catch their attention if it looks different. And then you can have them listen to your message once you have their attention. And don't be afraid to have fun with it and embrace something like baseball, music, gaming, or something more relevant like Tiger King or Bridgerton or whatever is hot on your partner's minds right now. But don't be afraid to infuse a breath of creative fresh air into your short-term spiff to add that element of talkability to reach people that you wouldn't normally reach in those programs. And then you can just get away from some of those run-of-the-mill spiffs that you may or may not be rolling out. Another tip here to kind of reach these people with those new messages is your CAMs, your field managers, your alliance managers, whatever you call them, the people who are interfacing with your partners. You need to have them on board with rolling these people out. More than likely, they'll still be on the front lines with them, whether they're transactional sellers or not. So are you helping them know what to say? Are you providing them with enablement kits, FAQs? Are you giving them their own dashboard to check the health of these different partners, to help them know who's who and what you want them to do and how they're changing? You can be proactive in this too. These are the kinds of things that can also be fed with data, and you can make them more proactive. So your partner field manager goes in and he's like, oh yeah, I need to contact these 10 partners today. I need to talk to them about their training because they're sending over a lot of referrals. They're influencers now. So I need to go talk to them about this. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about the incentives and rewards, because these are changing too. It's more than just those transactional incentives now, those sell X, get Y. It's also about behavior-based. This is more around changing behavior, whether it's getting to lock a deal, training, fill out a survey, Maybe you want them to implement solutions a little differently. Maybe you're rewarding them or wanting them to work together with those partners. Maybe they're doing something together. And then the last one is reward and recognize. This one is really important because it's kind of like that surprise and delight that you might have had with a customer that you can do for a partner too. And it's a way to recognize good work outside of those set parameters that are in your program. It feels a lot more genuine. It's going to help you build those relationships. And you just have to be able to empower those field managers to make those recognitions and those things more meaningful. And then I would just still consider, if you're only doing cash, that's not going to be relevant in the long term, especially as you're adding in these other audiences, and especially as you start to look at budgeting and things like that. Like, cash is never going to go away, but it should not be 100% cash anymore. You need to give them their choice, let them spend it on their marketing packages, their training, their merchandise, their trips, their charities, share it with somebody else in their organization. That's the power of personalization too, and that's going to be even more important with the flexibility that Jay speaks of in those ecosystems. And then another quick element is just be smarter with your promotions. So here, if you're spending a ton of money on national promotions, you can go more targeted. So if you're sending this out to everybody and you get 20%, maybe 1/3 of your partners actually would have participated in that. So your ROI can go up, and you can now break some of that budget off into things that are more meaningful. You can tackle some retention strategies, some influencer strategies. Maybe you can do a fast start program. So if you can be smarter with the way that you're spending money, which is more custom and tailored, you're going to see higher ROI by doing so. Just to recap it for you, make sure that you're tackling communications, make sure that you're personalizing some of those incentives. If you have a laundry list of benefits in your program, take a look at some of those too and say, if you just keep adding things like Jay had mentioned with his programs and everything never goes away, is it all still relevant? And are you giving them what they're looking for? So take a look at how you're tackling that as well. And then with enablement, make sure that this is relevant. I touched on this earlier. And rewards, please let them choose what's most meaningful for them, especially as you go beyond just the owner to the rep, to the other roles that are going to be in your programs. With that, I'm going to send it over to Jay to bring us home.
Yeah, of course we asked this question because we're very interested in what personalization actually means. You can think of personalization by your customer's role. You can think about it by where they are in the customer journey. You can think about it by your own role in your partner organization. But there's so many other ways. There's industry and sub-industry, the geography that you're in. There's the sector, size, and segment of your customer. There's the different product areas that they're focused on. There's the business model of the partner themselves in terms of how they make money. So, there are dozens of different levels of personalization. And I would actually be focused on all 8 of these because they all scored pretty high in terms of opportunities for you to double click and look at things like industry and look at, obviously the routes to market and different areas of where, you can take a generic promotion or a generic set of marketing and help start to pave that last mile. But when we looked at it, we saw that, in a hyper-specialized world, these aren't just a bunch of generic partners, jack of all trades that are out there doing all things to all people. They're getting very specific in terms of what they do every day. And a vendor's ability to support them in the sub-industries that they serve, the buyer roles and preferences and parts of the customer journey that the buyer's in, and get them at that right time and really focus on it at that level and move away from this just generalized campaigns that seem to serve no one. So in the end, it's this idea of paving that last mile or helping your partner pave that last mile. And the last time I added up all these permutations, there was 35 million different ways you can personalize. And one of the biggest errors that vendors make is that they're just not going to that second level. Forget about millions of layers of personalization. They're not even getting to that point of thinking through these different areas. And it's one of the biggest wins, and we hear it over and over and over again from partners.
If this is one of those things where if you're not looking at that moving into the future, your program will end up being dead on arrival, because this is like the crux of everything that the research was pointing to moving towards the future of, if it's not personalized or, like Jay says, double clicked down one more, it's not going to be relevant, and somebody else will be doing it, and they will go there instead because it's easier to do business with them. It matters to their customers. So how do you really tackle personalization? How can you start to infuse this into everything. And I threw together kind of a framework here of starting that macro level and working your way down into micro. And you don't have to do it all at once or even start at the top. This is just kind of a way of thinking about the different elements of how you can start to weave personalization into your programs. So at the very highest level, look at the program itself. This is kind of tying back to what Jay had just said of, not everybody can be in the same program. So what are you doing to make the way that you tier something more relevant for them? Is it based on industry or specialization? Do you have competency tracks they can enroll with instead of just joining different program types? Can they join one and then go from there? Maybe it makes more sense for you to restructure away from those volume tiers of gold, silver, and bronze, and instead focus on how your partners go to market, or maybe what clients they serve. And then take a look from there, once they're in the program and they're aligned to that specialty that they're focusing on, then tier on revenue. That's something that's more important to you than it is to them. And so you can certainly, it still makes sense that you have to have that in there because of your investments you're making, but it doesn't need the primary tiering focus. And the next level down is promotion. So what does personalization look like in promotions? Incentives, rule structures, make it relevant to them based on how they like to sell or what they sell or who they sell to. This goes back to the slide where I was showing you to the different ROIs. If a person comes in and they sell to a mid-sized client, don't ship them off the stuff that's for enterprise people. Be very tailored in what you're giving them. And if you're collecting that type of profile information, you could do it. The next step down is enablement. This is where segmentation, I think, can really sing, because right now we just don't have the resources at our disposal. No one has an army of channel marketers at their disposal to go make something for everybody. So segmentation is going to have to do a solid for you here at enablement. And this is where it just makes it more beneficial. So if they log into that partner experience portal, what are they going to see? Serve up the things that make sense for them. If they're a marketer, make sure they're seeing the things that would help them do that. If they're the owner, maybe share them the social selling training you put on there for the reps and give them a little note that says, hey, tell your reps to take this. So make it personalized for them. Even little things will go a long way. And then you get down into that micro level. What does your portal look like? What does engagement look like? And I have a couple of examples for you. So the portals themselves can reflect a lot of that personalization. So if you don't have something like this, it's something that kind of consolidates everything together. So if you have disparate infrastructure, a lot of different portals for a lot of different things, think of this more like an air traffic controller, where you're kind of bringing everything together for them and it navigates. So they log in, it queries their profile, what their data is, their status, their specialization, their status or eligibility in the program, and it pulls everything up and serves it to them. So they log in and they have their promotions. Maybe they have their enablement and training. Maybe it's their status in their program or where they're going next and what they need to achieve. What's that next milestone? So this essentially becomes the traffic controller for your program that is kind of that micro level of personalization that's going to help you get more activity, and they'll have a better experience as well. And then at the very, very micro level, what does personalization look like with engagement? What are those communication tactics? And this, again, it can be preset to feel personalized and entirely based on your segments, but it's still going to feel like you're listening to me. It's going to feel like you're talking to me like a person, and it's going to celebrate, it's going to nudge, it's going to remind, it's going to prompt them, and it's going to do it with relevance. So these are just a few ways that you can have a winning program that's not dead on arrival. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Jay to bring us home.
All right, so we looked at kind of the summary of all of this, and after all the analysis and all the different things that we looked at, we boiled it down to really three things and three core investments to avoid dead on arrival and really drive what partners want. And the first one really came back to partner experience. If you think of the people and the processes and the programs and the technology underneath all of that and all the things you run, the efforts your company makes in terms of customer experience, with 75% of all world trade going indirectly, those companies that are aligning partner experience with customer experience and understanding that they're one and the same are the ones that are winning. And understanding that it takes a level of self-service and automation, and obviously this personalization and tailored type of programs, understanding where partners want to go. And again, it's not coin operated. It is really business driven. This happened over and over. We heard about, simplified, clear communication that's transparent, that's timely, and understanding that you can't drive a great partner experience without open and frequent communication in terms of where things are going and how programs are evolving. And really, when you're thinking about value creation or co-innovation, leveraging network effects, that has to be almost daily, hourly, minute by minute communication between your two companies. And they're closer than ever before. It's not one-sided communication where you blast out a monthly newsletter. This is that type of tight, really automated communication that drives it forward. And I don't think if we, mentioned it enough around that personalized, tailored, this is not a one-size-fits-all. We have millions of new partners coming in from every different direction, and they're not coming in to be generalists. They've got very specific customers. They've got very specific areas that they are looking to build their businesses around, and they're looking for vendors to meet them halfway, and where they can pave the last mile, but they can't do that unless a vendor steps in and provides the incentives, the marketing, and all of the enablement necessary to be able to do that. So all of it came down to really vendors must use tailored, personalized marketing incentives to serve these partner objectives and drive participation, make it easier to use, and focus on that partner experience. And those are what partners want. It seems simple, but when we heard from this research over and over what the most important things and the biggest challenges were, so many organizations still are in that situation where they're not delivering what partners really want. So I'd love to invite Terry back in and open it up for some Q&A.
All right. Well, Ellen and Jay, thanks so much for really an amazing presentation. We did get a bunch of questions as you were speaking, but before I get to those, I do want to remind everyone once again to please share your thoughts and feedback before logging off today. And you can do so by clicking on the survey icon. The survey will also automatically launch when the session ends. So just a quick heads up to everyone that we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. But if we don't answer your questions, no worries. We'll ask Jay and Ellen to follow up in email. So let's get to those questions. We have one from Andrew. Andrew said, staff support, training, and enablement were ranked as the second main motivator for participating in a vendor's program. Ellen, do partners still need to be incentivized to take advantage of those offerings?
Ooh, this is a great question, and I'm going to answer with the dreaded "it depends" answer. But I would always say that it's going to depend on your partner program and your partners and the value that they're finding in using them. So it's important to understand how important that role is, that those elements play for your program and that partner experience, and ultimately the outcome for your customers. But if it's something that they want and you want them to be using more, or if you have metrics that show that it's going to provide a better client or partner outcome, if that's the case, then absolutely do run a behavior-based incentive geared to get them to try it or to change an old habit. Or if we're talking training specifically, I would always recommend including some sort of incentive with it. Unfortunately, you're always going to be running into people, especially if you're focusing on reps or people who are more traditional sellers, that are just not self-driven to do it. And so if they're having a good enough luck with what they know, you're going to have to prompt them to change that. And, the way to do that is to offer some of those incentives and give them a good enough reason to do it, at least at first. And then the last thing I would do is maybe gate some of those behind larger certification or training, like get them in the door with some and then help them finish and then reward them for that afterwards. But I would always recommend to ask the partners and really check your own metrics. Like, don't waste money on something if they want to participate in those things. Let them do that on their own. So I think it really just is going to depend on kind of your situation.
Okay, great. Ellen, I think this is for you too. It's from Diane. She said, do you have suggestions for boosting that two-way communication? I guess, specifically without adding to the noise and getting those responses from partners, which can be tough.
Yeah, this is always a struggle. That's why it's important to be creative in the stuff that you are doing one-to-many. But a couple of suggestions, I guess, for incorporating some of those two-way conversations would be to do some of that user-generated content or maybe mentoring or community aspects. If you don't have some of that in your program, these are great ways to kind of bridge that gap. We've also seen that user-generated content can sometimes be a great way to open that door. Obviously, it's usually incented, at least at first, but it's a great way to get some of that participation. And then I think part of this method is, what makes sense for them? Are you actually asking them for a reply? Maybe even look at the way that you're phrasing your communications, because sometimes an HTML email or just like, how are you doing it? Text them if you want a response, or maybe reach out through live chat, or, send them something. Don't be afraid of direct mail. Like, do something different, and I think you're more likely to garner a response. And if you want a response, make sure you're asking for one as well. And the second suggestion I probably would make is really rely on your CAMs or field managers or whatever you call them for yourself. But they're the face of your program. They're the ones who are going to create that two-way relationship the best. Help them know what to say, help them know how to answer questions, maybe make sure they're checking in appropriately. I'm sure you have high-performing ones and maybe not so great ones. And remember that they're the face of your program. So that can go a long way too in helping create some of that two-way communication. Recognition is another good one also, to let them empower them. Say thank you, and they always write back. Good question.
Well, thank you, Ellen. Okay. So Jay, 35 million layers of personalization. Katie asked, do you think there will be a more common route to personalization? You sort of mentioned that there's a lot of layers to get through. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And it actually links back to the previous two questions as well. The definition of collaboration changes, in a non-transactional world where, from a partner perspective, their definition of collaboration is not, I send in a deal registration and you phone me every week until the deal closes. That's not collaboration from their side. Both owners and partners both said that we want product and solution development. They're thinking from the business aspect first. So when they're thinking about collaboration, this is where that level of the 35 million comes in. And when you're in that conversation and they're talking about a mid-sized clinic with 50 doctors in upstate New York, they're at that level of granularity. They're not asking the vendor to get to that level of granularity, but you've got to step into, perhaps the healthcare industry. You've got to step into maybe that region. You've got to step into that buyer type. And if it is, a set of marketing, whether it's an ebook or white paper or podcast or whichever you're going to do to drive that, or a set of incentives, and really to drive value creation as a behavior, really drive this co-innovation, this product development, and drive KPIs around development as one of the outputs of motivation and loyalty, and redirecting money in ways that are not as coin operated as they have been in the past. So again, no one is asking vendors to build 35 million ebooks, but when you work with your partners closer and you start collaborating, you can meet in the middle and let them pave the last mile. But you can't do that unless you step in or double click.
Okay, thank you. We're getting close on time, but I think we have a few minutes for one more. Frank had asked this: because incentives and rewards have been so closely tied to sales performance, is there a different or more subtle bottom line metric that channel leaders should be measuring? And Jay and Ellen, I'll leave that up to either of you.
Do you want me to take that one, Jay, or do you want to?
Why don't you go first, and I'll come in after.
Right. Sounds good. Well, I think even during the presentation, Jay had started to touch on some of these. If you're going to need metrics along the way with the things that you're changing, which are inevitably going to be different than your traditional bottom line metrics. So a couple of very specific ones, and I would actually recommend customer research. Mostly it's called a path to purchase study, but it can identify the things that lead to making a sale. And those are ways that you can identify areas that you might want to measure against that would lead to a sale. But these can make compelling metrics, especially as you're thinking about your influencers or that top of the funnel. And then another thing that I would mention is we regularly measure participation, which can mean something different for a lot of people. So clearly define that for your program. but what is happening in your program and also inside the partner's entity, like their organization. So do you have more reach with various role types inside a program that might equate to increased performance? Perhaps you should be measuring that, or partner staff makeup. Once activities happen, maybe you're measuring ongoing activity that's looking more into the future. Think partner or customer lifetime value, or what is going to equate to a pipeline effectiveness score? What's going to matter the most when you're recurring and renewing everything? So the metrics, I think it's not necessarily getting away from some of those bottom line metrics, but instead stretching it out and broadening the look of what you're measuring up and down that funnel, because it's going to be important to both of you for creating that value to the customer. And then together, I would say look at retention and growth metrics as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, there's a couple elements to it. One is you elongate the conversation around incentives. So on a transactional or retail resell model, you're looking at more than just the transaction, which is still very, very important. But earlier than that, especially as customers are on these digital and digital-only journeys, figuring out a way to attribute behavior and really drive incentives earlier in the journey, which is going to drive vendor selection, which is going to drive the transaction in the end. Whether that partner collects the customer's money or not, that's really important to you. And with a lot of companies, upwards of 76% of companies right now are thinking about subscription and consumption models. The transaction is the first 30 days with the customer. Now you have to focus on adoption to get renewals. You have to focus on integrations and stickiness to get retention. You have to focus on upsell and cross-sell every 30 days forever. So you got to start, again, elongating these incentives to make sure that you have a set of partners that are there forever, providing the right behaviors and the right motions to make sure you have a customer for life, getting that long-term value, which is the key KPI in a subscription model. So that's the one element. The second element, if you've got a whole set of new partners that are coming on board that are non-transactional at all, and things around value creation and co-innovation and network effects, should be something that you start to begin to recognize and measure. And those companies that can get you into new conversations, those companies that can help build IP and serve different business models, have to be motivated as well. So these are non-transactional and non-traditional type of partnerships that are going to be probably the majority, in the next 10 years or so. And your company has to start realizing this and it's almost playing three-dimensional chess here, figuring out who that partner is and making sure that you're covering all your bases.
All right. Well, look, I think we're right on time again. Ellen and Jay, thanks so much for doing a great session. And I want to thank all of the attendees for joining us today. If we didn't get your question today, we'll send it off to Jay and Ellen and have them follow up with us afterwards. So again, thanks everybody and have a great rest of your day.